It's round 5 of the Fide World Cup, and I'm going to show you an intriguing game between Sam the Man Shankland and Peter Svidler. Peter, of course, 8-time Russian champion. Sam, well, he's in very good form at the moment, having won a classical event in Prague very recently. So, first game in round 5, their first classical game, was drawn. This is the second classical game. Now, we know that Peter has a great love of the Grunfeld after knight c3, and we go d5. But Sam has come to the board with an anti-Grunfeld system, namely pawn to h4. Well, these days one can get away with such stuff. Of course, it's not that bad. You know, if you already claim the centre with these pawns, then h4 simply can't be a bad move. And of course, it's directed against the fianchetto. We're going to hope to play h5 at some moment. Bishop g7, and now knight c3. So this is very interesting. If d5, then h5 makes a lot of sense, because of course if knight takes, then this pawn can be taken, well, with either knight or pawn, probably pawn actually. And it could be very useful to have the h-file open. So d6. So basically what is happening now is we're just going into a King's Indian where white has played h4. Well, you could say a little bit prematurely, but it's certainly not a bad move. And basically Shankland now plays a pretty standard Zamish with f3, supporting this pawn, controlling the g4 square. But he's played h4 at quite an early stage, but that's certainly not a bad idea. So e5, but you can see how he's managed to circumvent Svidler's Grunfeld in a rather clever way. So e5, I think, very logical to counter in the centre when your opponent plays h4 at an early stage. And of course, Shankland closes the centre. And there's no need for the knight to go back. If the knight goes back, that's exactly what white wants. Then you have this clamp on the king's side and control in the centre. And you're ready to play h5. This is a dream scenario for the Zamish. But of course, in this position, after d5, there's no need to go backwards. The knight leaps forward into the middle, and, well, white certainly doesn't want to open things up for that bishop. Bishop e3. So Shankland basically wants to encourage black to exchange on e2. And now actually I think knight takes is the best solution to cover these squares. And then, well, I'd say it's not so bad for black, but of course white has a pretty standard position here, and later on can perhaps think about playing g4. But really exchanging on e2 is backing down from black's viewpoint. You want to play c5. And white can't live with that knight there. You have to get rid of it. So, but instead of exchanging, you exchange on c6 first. Pawn takes, of course, black offers that pawn. If you back down with knight c6, that's dreadful, because then this is a clear target. White is fine there. So, of course, pawn takes pawn. And this is a very standard kind of pawn sacrifice in these variations. And now, well, there are potential open file here. The centre might open. This pawn on h4 doesn't seem to have a lot of purpose at the moment. And, you know, white's king has a dilemma. What does it go to the king side, queen side, stay in the middle? So it's not an easy one. So rook b8 looks very natural, putting the rook on a semi-open file. Queen c2 covers. And now black has to think, how do you break? You know, d5 feels like the right move, but actually after castles, then the king is relatively safe. That seems okay. So Svidler tries c5. The bishop drops back. Bishop e6. Now castles queenside. And, well, black has to think how to generate play. The point of c5 was to drive the bishop away from this diagonal, and of course the bishop and the rook could combine very nicely here. So looks like decent compensation for black. The diagonal opens. This knight perhaps wants to spin round to attack here, maybe come into c6 and b4 and d4. It's going to be a question of time. You know, black has lots of nice moves to play. Can white kind of stabilize things? But, well, rook takes d6. It's not exactly a stabilizing move. So Shankland grabs another pawn. Queen a5. That's scary. Svidler now 2 pawns down, but has a lot of play with his pieces. And Shankland's pieces on the king side yet to join the struggle. So this is very brave play, I think, particularly from Shankland, grabbing these pawns and hoping that he can survive this attack. I mean, both players had invested quite a lot of time, actually, just to get to this point. Bishop e1, bolstering the knight on c3. So knight e5. The knight spins round, looking at the c4 pawn. And here, I think this is a really critical moment in the game where white has to choose between several different paths. I guess, you know, the obvious move is to protect that pawn, to play b3. But that does weaken these dark squares, but, I mean, who knows? This is possible, exchanging off that rook. And then the knight will spin round. I mean, it's an incredibly double-edged position. Could very easily go wrong. That rook, would, of course, would love to come over to d1, but it's shot in the corner. So, but that's definitely an option. If h5, I mean, of course, it's tempting to continue, but then bishop takes c4. Seems pretty nice for black. I mean, looks terrifying. So Shankland thought for about 8.5 minutes here and came up with f4. Basically, this move seeks to clarify the situation in the middle and on the queen side. So it provokes this pawn capture. So exchanges, of course, that knight is too dangerous. And then e5. So with that little sequence, Shankland has exchanged off a pair of minor pieces. So that rook might well come into play on h1. But also, he's managed to shut out that bishop on g7. So although he's given up a pawn, it's a very pragmatic move, actually. It just kind of takes the sting out of the position. Rook d8. But, of course, Svidler will be glad to get one of the pawns back. And he still has some pressure. These pieces active. This bishop, of course, on g7, not as good as it was. But still, black's remaining pieces still very active. Bishop takes pawn. So Shankland doesn't bother protecting that pawn. Well, I mean, in this position, it's going to be hard to actually when... I mean, obviously, king b1 runs into bishop d3. If b3, then bishop d3 would come anyway. So, but this is part of the plan, basically. He's not too bothered about giving back a pawn, giving back that extra pawn, but it's all about activity. And just kind of trying to wrest the initiative from black here. So material is now level, but white's piece is now pretty active. This knight coming to a beautiful square on e4. The queen attacked. And this is a very important moment in the game. A discovered attack on the queen. Where should that queen go to? Svidler gets it wrong. Let's see what he should have done. He actually played queen b6, but he should have played queen b5. And here, well, if, let's say, knight d6, then the queen steps back to a6. Well, queen c5 I think would be a mistake, because then the king is a little bit too exposed. But here, well, rook h3 is possible to bring that rook into the game. And position is very much in the balance. Level material. Whose king is safer? Well, probably black's king is a little bit safer, but that knight, of course, is a very impressive beast. It looks very octopus-like on d6, but of course, an exchange sack could be possible to open those bishops. Possibly bishop f8 to get rid of that knight. It's very much in the balance. If bishop h4 here, this has, let me see, after, yeah, bishop h4, this has some relevance to the game. We'll compare and contrast in a second. Then the rook can step up and, well, black is absolutely fine here with potential to attack. So let's see the difference. In the game, queen b6 was played. And you can sort of understand why Svidler wanted to put the queen on b6, because after queen b5, of course, the queen loses a tempo after this. So he's trying to avoid that, but it's very unfortunate. Bishop h4, excellent move from Shankland. So if the rook moves away, let's say to b8, then knight f6 is deadly. Obviously, that can't be taken because, well, the h-file comes good. And if king f8, that is very unfortunate. That shows why the queen should not be on b6. And after rook d4, this is the game continuation. Again, knight check. Of course, the king can't step onto the h-file because of the rook. King f8. And I suspect this is the move that Svidler overlooked. Simple move. The bishop comes back again. Bishop f2, hitting the rook. Of course, rook c4. Well, there's too much going on here. I mean, one can simply play knight d7 check, and that gives a winning endgame. The most accurate is this. And then here. And, well, everything is winning, basically. Knight. Well, actually, not everything is winning quite here, but queen takes is winning. And obviously a winning endgame. So bishop f2 is a very awkward move. The rook basically doesn't have a safe square to go to. Obviously rook takes f4, knight d7 check again, and there is no good move back here. Rook d8 allows bishop c5 check, winning the queen. And, well, actually, now that I look at it, forcing checkmate as well. Almost, yeah. Anyway, we'll take the queen. Good enough. Rook d6 avoids an immediate catastrophe. Actually, even that is going to be mate. I'm just thinking out loud. Just talk amongst yourselves. So, bishop f2, a winning move. Bishop takes f6 played. Pawn takes, threatening rook h8 mate. Queen takes c5 check. So if king g8, then obviously bishop takes rook. Disaster. So rook d6 played, blocking the check. And now everything hangs together for white. Queen c8 is a winning move. There is simply no defense. Svidler resigned here. Why? Well, if the king steps up, then of course queen h8 is mate. If rook d8, I mean, this is actually a very, very neat tactic. Rook h8 check. So king takes, and this is winning. And queen takes, check here, and bishop d4 check. All the tactics work. And have I missed anything out? Queen d8, rook h8 wins the queen. And last but not least, king e7, bishop h4. That bishop shuttling between f2 and h4 along this diagonal, absolutely deadly, winning the queen. So with that, Sam Shankland knocks out Peter Svidler and goes through to the 6th round, which I think is actually the quarterfinals. I might have got that completely wrong, but anyway, he's through into the next round. Fantastic achievement to beat Peter Svidler. I mean, they're rated roughly the same, but still, it shows that Sam is on excellent form. And I think a very instructive game, really nice game from Sam Shankland. First of all, just a couple of things. This anti-Grunfeld system with h4, you don't need to go crazy. It's basically a way of getting into a Zamish King's Indian. And then I really like this move. Pawn to f4 here. Computers don't think it's the best move actually, but it's a really pragmatic move that basically just clears the situation, even though it's giving back material. Basically, it's a lot easier for white to play now than by holding on to the pawns. And I think, well, as was proven by the game continuation, excellent practical decision from Shankland. So there we go. Thanks for watching the video. Don't forget, merch sale at the moment in the PowerPlayChess online store. You'll find the links down there. And don't forget, 20% discount on all PowerPlayChess merch, including, of course, the new design, pin and win, and the Octopus Knight, split rooks, Queen in Siberia. 20% discount for just 24 hours remaining. Just 1 day left on the 20% discount. Use the code in the video description and you'll see it. I'll put it in the comments as well. Thanks for watching.